Hello, folks. This is Jeff Nodell with San Juan's Today. It is Thursday, the 20th of March, and with me is John Nance, John J. Nance, a good friend of San Juan's Today. John, thanks for joining us.
Always my pleasure.
Yeah. We want to talk about airline safety, and for anyone who may have been in a coma for the last 20 years or 30 years, John is one of the most respected analysts of airline safety for decades. He's been the go-to person for ABC News every time anything needs to be explained. And also you provided analysis for dozens of Mayday television shows that
True.
tend to examine notable incidents. So thank you so much. I wanted to talk to you about airline safety because, and I've watched a lot of your messaging over the years, until recently anyway, maybe still, your message was that airline safety was increasing and getting better and better all the time. And it feels like, for many people, it feels like that has changed recently. Has it?
Well, I'll give you a good lawyer-like answer, yes and no. Well, first of all, you got to remember, go back to the bad old days of the 80s when we were in a massive transition in aviation safety from just the captain is God and everybody follows to a real team effort. And I'll go into that a little bit more because it's really apropos. But in that particular realm, we couldn't go a year without a major accident. And people have forgotten that because now we went over 12 years before we've had this series of accidents. And the first thing you do is look at them and say, what's the common denominator? Well, other than the fact that they're airliners, there is no common denominator. We haven't seen a failure of air traffic control here, here, and here, or a failure of the structure here, here, and here. So this is really preliminary in terms of being able to say, is it going backwards or not? I really personally think, and being right in the middle of this whenever something occurs with ABC, I really think we simply get hyper vigilant in the media. And this is not a criticism, this is just a fact of life. Because when people are starting to get concerned, and then you have another incident and another incident and another incident, well, we're going to put all our force and effect of what we can do in informing the public on those particular accidents and incidents. But what is missing, as a matter of natural course, is the other side of it, a year or 2 years down the road when we can come back in and say, well, this is what we didn't tell you at the time because we really didn't know it. That has a lot to do with it. So right now as we sit here, the accidents that we've had that are pretty galvanizing and the near misses that we've had really do not tell a tale of deterioration of flight safety. It tells more of a tale of the incredible ubiquitous nature of flying.
So people shouldn't worry?
Well, there again is one of those things of, if you really are worried about aviation safety, you need to look at the figures. 100,000 commercial flights over the world every single day, and almost nothing ever goes wrong. I mean, it's really incredible because in every one of those airplanes, all over the world, we've got two pilots, two human beings that are fallible, and we've got the capability of doing something at the last minute that could crash an airplane, and it just doesn't happen. Also, over the United States, we have about 32,000 flights on which any of us could buy a ticket, and the same situation pertains there. We've got large airplanes, small airplanes, bad weather, bad situations, middle of the night, mechanical problems, and still we get you there safely. Maybe not as well fed or as well treated as before, but safely.
Is there a chance that all of the problems facing Boeing, and everybody knows the problems facing Boeing on performance, on employee satisfaction, just in every metric they have a challenge?
Yeah.
Is there a chance that we sometimes conflate Boeing's trouble with worries about the airline? Are they really firewalled? Are they separate, or are Boeing's problems somehow creeping into airline safety?
Well, in the case of Boeing and what's been going on in terms of quality control and the complete revolution that they are having to go through, I really don't think there's any basic connection. And I can explain that this way. This was a corporate philosophy that got them in trouble. A corporate philosophy that grew when they were in a forced marriage with McDonnell Douglas, which was failing down in California. And for some reason that is still unfathomable to me, they bring a fellow by the name of Harry Stonecipher, who had been the head down there and had been presiding over the slow destruction of their commercial company. They bring him in and put him at the head of Boeing. Mr. Stonecipher, I'm sure, is a wonderful individual, but as a leader, he was terrible. He came, I should say, into Boeing. Boeing was a highly respected, highly capable engineering company that took great pride in saying that. We're an engineering company, we build great airplanes, and we're well established. And he changed that mantra to where people were running around saying, we're an international company, we make a lot of money, oh yeah, and we build airplanes. The philosophy cannot be overstated in terms of the destructive nature of what they did to the internal pride by pushing and saying, okay, how many airplanes can we push off this line? Okay, don't fix this here, let's push it down and we'll do it over here. And all the compromises that built and built and built, I lay those right at the feet of Harry Stonecipher. And he pretty much came very close to destroying Boeing.
Do you have confidence in the new leadership?
I have confidence that the new leadership and the board are well aware of not only the malaise, but also what nearly gutted the company, certainly in terms of public opinion. And I don't think that they're going to make the same mistakes again. Matter of fact, they know it would be fatal if they did. Now, the problem is you've got 20 years of off-course flying to correct. The airplanes are still superlative. I mean, I can tell you as a pilot, I would fly an Airbus product at any time. It's a good company. They build good airplanes, but Boeing still has the edge. Things like, for instance, the unified wing spar and a lot of stuff that Boeing does that nobody else on the planet does. Their basic attention to detail in terms of two things. Number one, good pilot interface, human-machine interface, I think has been superlative. I've flown Lockheed products, especially in the Air Force, the Lockheed C-141. Great airplane, but they had employed every aunt, uncle, brother, and cousin, I think, to put all the switches and all the different things. Could have been done much simpler. Boeing was always very straightforward and simple. You want to turn something on? Boom, there it is. You want to turn it off? There it is. I think that excellence in design philosophy is still with us. I don't think there's been a diminution of that. The diminution I've seen has been in performance on the front lines in the factory and what it took to get quality airplanes out. Of course, the absolute ridiculous end result of this was the blowout of the door in an Alaska Airlines 737 that we at Alaska, and I'm not speaking for Alaska, but I am a very proud ex-pilot for Alaska, retired, we had a right, as any airline does, to say, okay, we paid you for the airplane, it's been certified, we can fly it now with complete confidence, and then boom, we have a hole, and we could have ended up losing passengers. We could have ended up losing the airplane. There was no excuse for that. None. Zero.
So I'm hearing more and more a phrase, Trump's FAA. Is that fair? Are we at a point where the administration is actually affecting the FAA, or is the FAA so strong and firewalled that, for instance, my question, a side question to that is, isn't it true that there were already staffing issues at the FAA under the previous president, the previous administration? So how much of this is there any connection between the new administration and problems at the FAA?
Well, yes, and potentially catastrophically. Let me explain. First of all, the largest portion of the FAA is air traffic control. I mean, by a long shot, that's the major thing. They really should have been, in my opinion, separated a long time ago, but they haven't been and they aren't now. They're under the Department of Transportation. We've got somebody in the Department of Transportation and now the new FAA chief who are total unknowns as far as what they really know and what they bring to the table. We have been behind in air traffic control in new equipment, behind in upgrading existing equipment, behind in having enough people to maintain the equipment, on and on and on for a long time, and we haven't had enough controllers. And it takes 1.5 to 2 years to put somebody in the pipeline from the hire date and get them out as a junior qualified controller on the other end. Anything that retards that, like somebody who's really not elected running around trying to slash things like Mr. Musk is, imperils that system. And here's the other part of it too, before I get to the other part of the FAA's functions and how threatened they are by what's going on here. Aviation safety is, and I challenge anybody to challenge me on this, aviation safety is a very, very delicately balanced system. In the 80s, we had a number of people, quite a few of them in fact, invited in. Hey, come on boys, it's a great investment, put investment in an airline, start up an airline. These are people that had no idea what they were doing, zero. And they, in some cases, succeeded, in some cases, like Air Florida, failed miserably because they did not understand this. I'm not saying they're bad people, I'm just saying they did not understand. Aviation safety is a delicate balance. It's like taking a perfectly inverted metal bowl and a perfectly spherical marble and holding that marble in position up top by just either air currents or blowing on it or something. If you're constantly doing this and you never flag for a split second, you will keep it up there just fine. But you let that thing start going down one side or another, it plays hell to get it back up. It's that delicate. And if you get people who, for instance, back in the 80s, we had a lot of Boeing 727s around, and they took 3 generators and had one on each engine. You had people who thought that they were doing the right thing by saying, well, it'd be more efficient rather than having 5 of these things on the shelf at one of our outstations because they're expensive. Just put one of them, or better yet, put none of them there. We'll have them in Atlanta or we'll have them in Chicago, and we'll ship them out if needed. Well, now what happens is you've got a captain who's under pressure, bad weather, bad night, whatever it might be, and he's got a generator down, so he's only got 2, and the book says you can fly with that, and maintenance can certify that, but now if you lose another one, you're down to 1 in bad weather, and you're really pushing the margins. This is the sort of thing that none of these folks in the bottom line could understand. And so they pushed and they pressed and they wiggled and they put us in great peril in many cases, and we ended up having a lot of accidents partially as a result, or as a result, for instance, in the case of Air Florida crashing into the Potomac, completely avoidable, ridiculous accident, and you could have just basically said we saw it coming. So delicate balance. That's basically the overall moniker, I would say, for aviation safety in general. Now you take the FAA, the part that is not air traffic control, and they are mentors when they are at their best. They're not cops on the beat. Yeah, we give them that authority. We give them the regulatory authority. As a matter of fact, it's something I think the National Transportation Safety Board should have a standby version of, but that's a whole different argument. But if the FAA flags in their ability, either because of cut down manpower, lack of budget, or stupidity at the top, whatever it might be, if they flag in their ability to stay one-to-one in connection with the airline industry especially, and say, you know, we guide you over here, yes, we can force you to do this, but we're here to help. You know, I know that's always a joke. It's always been a joke in anything I've ever had to do with military or aviation of, hi, we're from the government, we're here to help. But in fact, that's what they do. The finest hours for the FAA have been when they've been good mentors. Because, here's the point, the bottom line of FAA minimums, in other words, you can't go below this, you can't have inspections that go past a certain date. I mean, there are a million different regulations. The general public thinks, well, as long as you're in compliance with those regulations, we're in good shape. Absolutely not. That's not what built commercial aviation. Commercial aviation is way up here. We're in our own compliance level. Here are the minimums down there. You see an airline that's bumping along with the minimums, you don't want to fly them. You don't even want to taxi with them. And we've had this in the past, and it has identified itself in collapses, in crashes, and all sorts of internal problems. And we have learned over time in aviation, I think, very clearly, you let the airlines do what they naturally want to do, which is be excellent and no crashes and no diminution of safety. The FAA is there to help support that. Don't ever go down and bump along the minimums. Now, you reach into that and say, well, we don't need about 20% of the personnel here. You're upsetting an incredible delicate balance in terms of who's got what office and who's, for instance, watching the Part 135 carriers. Now, this isn't the mainstream airlines, but Part 135s are on-demand air taxis. and there are some that run closer to what we call Part 121, which is the regulation for the major airlines. You start messing around with some of the interrelationships there, and you're going to confuse the industry. You're going to give an opening to bottom line people who don't know what they're doing, and you rattle the whole structure. This is not boilerplate. This is not a truck assembly factory. This is a very delicately balanced system, and what we don't need are people who have no idea what the heck they're doing, running around, firing individuals, moving this around, and making a politicized decision in any particular thing that affects safety.
Are you similarly concerned about downsizing in agencies like NOAA?
Almost panicked, I would say, in terms of the fact that our scientific base of understanding of the world, everything from global warming, which is incredibly real and with us. I wrote a book on atmospherics back in 1990 that was very well received. It was called What Goes Up. It was mainly about the ozone hole over Antarctica. But I got to know a lot of wonderful people in the scientific community. These people are not political. They could care less. They just want to do their science. And now we've got an anti-science attitude, I suppose I could say, to be as charitable as possible with this incoming crowd. And to the extent that they're, for instance, dismissing the medical world, contracting research in these different areas and research in hard sciences, this is catastrophic. Well, it's Neanderthal, and I'm probably insulting Neanderthals.
Describe the relationship between weather and weather forecasting and aviation.
It's a one-to-one. We fly in a soup of reality that has to be understood, and we of course now have so much more to work with than we had 50 years ago, when it was rising and lowering barometers and observation posts and things like that. We've got satellites, we've got all sorts of capabilities, but we still have to make a decision between the dispatcher and the captain on whether or not the particular given situation is safe to fly in. And yes, we can make decisions about staying away from a particular storm track area, knowing that there's going to be tornadic activity later on in the afternoon. We can stay out of extreme cold situations, or at least handle them properly. I mean, there are a million different variations of this. And no, we don't have a relationship with the weather forecasting that is one-to-one government to private, because the private airlines develop their own weather departments, but they do it on the foundation of understanding, knowledge, and science that comes from governmental research and governmental actions over time. So you start messing with that, and here we go again with somebody with a sledgehammer and inside a delicately fine-tuned Swiss watch. It's at best stupid, at worst criminal.
So my last question, I need to word very carefully, and you answer everything with care, so I'm not worried about your answer. Yeah. I'm worried about my question. But I'm going to ask it anyway. Will it take a terrible disaster or a series of disasters to illuminate the folly of some of these, the meat axe, chainsaw, I think, is the symbol for this now? Or is it possible that cooler heads could prevail somehow in this conversation and turn back and stop and rebuild whatever has been destroyed, rebuild it in the airline world, the airline safety question? Are we waiting for disasters?
Right now, right, it's a great question and a very nuanced one and very difficult to answer in the current atmosphere. Yeah. When you start letting political decisions override logic, reason, and understanding, you're always in trouble. Let me move over to another area to give you kind of an analogous concern. In medicine, we have a lot of very delicately balanced situations going on in hospitals that are not fully funded, and patient safety now run amok because that has been pretty much canceled by the outfall of COVID. If we take a look at that area and we say we've got to wait for a big disaster, Well, it's not going to happen because we kill people one at a time. We may kill 1.5 million Americans unnecessarily in American medicine because of patient safety shortfalls, and by the way, that probably is a good figure. But it's one at a time. And so we don't have a situation where that next big crash is going to cause a lot of attention. Matter of fact, for my career, 30 some odd years in aviation has also been paralleled by 30 years in medicine, trying to bring across the things we've learned about human beings and complex systems. And it's scary to say the least. Even the concept of saying, well, we're going to cut back on this, we're going to cut back on that. Going back to aviation, we do have the opportunity to have a thunderous, horrible, bloodletting Tenerife crash. Tenerife was March 27th, 1977 on the Canary Islands. 2 747s came together. The outfall of that accident was that we couldn't just give airplanes to qualified pilots and say, you boys be careful out there now here. We had to do something about human failure, and that was the revolution in air safety. By the same token, I don't know that a major crash would even be able to change the course right now when you get political decisions being made over things that have absolutely no reason to be politicized. In other words, 20% off here, these people out over here, let's get the budget down, let's get rid of the science over here, we don't need it. We're in a terrible, terrible situation right now. And if it is allowed to go 5 or 6 years down the road, in other words, it outlives this particular administration, we still are going to have a lot to put back together. And to do that, we're going to have a body politic that abandons the short, stigmatized version of any opinion and looks to the science and looks to the reality. And I'm afraid that is one thing that is being almost destroyed by 50% of the voting population in just going down the road with accepting one thing. For instance, global warming. I've been in that fight for 30 years. I'm not a scientist, I'm a reporter, I'm a writer. But I can tell you, it was never a political situation. It was always a matter of what are we putting into the atmosphere. And these people who want to run around and say, well, there's nothing to global warming, you're idiots. You're idiots.
Let's end on a happy note. Explain the little lapel pin here. What is that?
This is my service pin for Alaska Airlines. And they give them to you at a certain period. This is my 10-year pin. And I'm proud of my association with Alaska.
You wear it with pride.
I do.
You're a person who's had a career in military and aviation. There are many pins that could be on your coat right now, but it says a lot that's the pin that you choose to wear around the streets of Friday Harbor.
I'm shamelessly biased when it comes to Alaska, but I'm very proud of the airline. When I joined them, I was also in the public eye on safety. And I remember coming back the day that I kind of signed up and got ready to go into training. I said to my wife, what if, I'm out here touting safety. What if I get in this airline and find it's a real schlock operation? Well, thank God it was exactly the opposite. It was superlative, but that was a concern. Now they have done such a great job over time, and again, this is a commercial for Alaska, and I know it, and I'm sorry, but I love my airline, and I think we've done one heck of a job.
So, John, thank you for answering these questions. We have in the San Juans many people who fly out of SeaTac for vacations. We have many people who own second homes who fly in to be here in the summer, and this is a very well-traveled population, so I really appreciate you taking the time to answer questions that I think almost every household has every time, something. I think we've had a little bit of a quiet period here for a few weeks, but it feels like something that is going to be back in the headlines before too long.
Well, I would love to say crashes are a thing of the past. We know that's not true. By the same token, all you have to do is go talk to an insurance company about buying $1 million policy that only pays off if you die in an airline crash. It's pennies on the dollar because they know they'll never have to pay off. Just doesn't happen.
All right. Thank you very much.
Thank you.